Yeah, using this camera as a webcam is a pretty neat trick, man.
Yeah.
Oh, let me brush my beard really quick. Oh man, I forgot. All right, there we go. There we go. Look a little better.
You ready to go?
Oh yeah.
All right. So hello, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us a minute here while we get started. I'm Justin Staley. I'm the Senior Manager of Product Development at FUJIFILM North America, and I host these talks with photographers and all the content going on with Photo Plus Expo. Today, it is my distinct pleasure to have Mike McCoy on. He's a photographer based in Washington, D.C. He had 2 tours in Iraq over 5 years with the United States Army and spent time at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. During his hospitalization, he discovered documentary photography, and from that moment on, it was instrumental in how he sees the world. Since picking up the camera, he has amassed a compelling body of work, showcasing everything from portraits, families, fathers and daughters, church services, and political protests. His work has been widely published, and in 2017, Michael was selected as one of the Time magazine African American photographers to follow. In addition to working as a freelance photographer, Michael is dedicated to helping veterans like himself battle PTSD using photography as a platform for both creativity and communication. We are thrilled to welcome Michael McCoy today to share with you his work and his stories and the way he captures pictures. So thanks for coming, Michael.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So let's go back. How did you get started making pictures?
Actually, photography, excuse me, kind of found me. As a kid, my dad would keep a film camera in the car, and I would just pick it up and play around with it, really not know what I was doing. But as I got older, you start to meet girls, you kind of put the camera down, and it wasn't until I got to Iraq, and I would take photographs of my mother just to let her know I was okay. And one thing led to another, and years later, there I am. Because you finally realize that you can't catch up on all the time that you missed. Whether it was birthdays, celebrations, parties. So why not document? And once I pick the camera back up, I can't put it down.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It sort of demarks those things and captures those memories and moments. I remember my dad was an Air Force veteran in Vietnam, and I remember as a child looking through slides and seeing his pictures from Vietnam and seeing then pictures as me as a kid, and it becomes that memory entangled with everything. And so it's just, to me, this wonderful way to look back on those times, remember things of vacations, holidays, happy times, portraits out in front of a new house, and all those things. And so to me, photography is an extremely powerful tool.
Yeah.
Do you want to start sharing with us some pictures, or how do you want to go about today?
Let's freestyle. Ask some questions. If anyone else in the audience has any questions, I'll be more than happy. I'm trying to get together some photographs right now. I'm gonna go ahead and plug in this other hard drive really quick, guys. So let's see what we have.
Well, so you're in DC. I know you've been covering a lot of the things from Black Lives Matter Plaza and stuff over the past couple months. What's been going on this past couple days in DC, and what have you been seeing?
Lately I've been covering the elections. So throughout the campaign, I've had the opportunity to cover Kamala Harris and a little bit of Joe Biden. This was kind of maybe like pre-election, but lately we were just waiting on the results. So everything's kind of been like on pins and needles for the past few days. But Saturday the announcement was made, and we now have a new vice president and president elect.
So you've been busy doing lots of things, running around. I'm sure. Yeah, makes it tough to do much else than do that, because you're waiting on pins and needles. You're hurry up and wait. But I think you have a little bit of experience that from your military time.
Yeah.
So
So
going back to the thing, you came back from Iraq, you're in Walter Reed, and you picked up the camera again. What were you photographing? What were you doing at that point? What was your purpose?
you know, I would just photograph anything that could be a memory. You know, anything that catches my eye. You know, it could be uh, a man, it could be a woman, it could just be anybody. You know, it's all about just capturing that essence.
So how did that make then the transition to going into journalism? What were the first stories you covered?
Oh man, I don't remember the exact first story I covered, but you know, the transition for me, I don't even want to say it was a transition because, I mean, it just felt right. It just felt good the entire time.
Well, that's the thing, following your passion and doing
Yeah,
what you really want to do. It shouldn't feel like work and it shouldn't feel like a transition. Just be, right? So
yeah.
it's just in that flow, people call it, or lots of other names for it. But so what were some of the early stories you did?
I shot stories around the 2000. What was that? The last government shutdown. Oh man, we've had so many shutdowns. Oh man, give me a minute. I just kind of went blank. It'll come back to me.
Okay, so working with the government shutdowns, I mean, being in DC, being in Baltimore, DC area, that kind of, I think politics and that machine of government kind of influences your life.
Yeah, it does. You
So
know,
that was sort of,
every day is something new. You know,
yeah,
you know, one day you could be covering, you know, assignments on the Hill. The next day, you can have protests over a remark that the president may have made that the general public didn't like. It could be anything.
yeah. So what's key to covering these things? What kind of things make you really well equipped for covering those kind of assignments?
Of course, having the right gear, having a good buddy system, um, safety. You know, first and foremost, safety is like the most essential thing out there. You know, because you have to totally be aware of your surroundings. And luckily, I kind of have that edge by having military training, so that I can, you know, adapt and identify things that may, I don't want to say hostile, but things that could not be in my best interest to kind of stay away from.
Yeah, well, it's following that little voice in your belly. I have lots of friends over the years that have been combat photographers and have covered conflict from Croatia, Bosnia, Chechnya, all over the place, Libya. And so, yeah, it's having that little voice in the back of your head and that training that just kicks in, and I shouldn't be here right now.
Right.
And listening to that little voice in your head going, yeah, the pictures are great, but something's telling me I shouldn't be here, and reacting to it. Any advice you have for someone that wants to get started as a working journalist?
Uh, take as many pictures as you can. Find something that you're passionate about. Never stop. And you know, don't worry about gear. Don't chase gear. You know, gear doesn't make a photographer. You know, these eyes are what makes these photographers and what makes photographs. You know, pick up on books. You know, like for example, if you look behind me, you know, I have Eli Reed's book Black in America, and then also have the Gordon Parks collective works, and then also have this new book that I got the other day, which I really haven't had a chance to go through. It's a pretty big book. Diode Bay, Seeing Deeply. You know, find photographers that interest you. You know, study other works. You know, join photo clubs.
I know your community is really important to you. I know you do a lot of teaching and work with the youth in Greater DC. Anything you can want to talk to about that?
Um, wow. You know, working with kids. I mean, it's definitely a good experience. I mean, I always thought I was a young guy, but working with these kids can kind of make you feel old. But it also, you know, keeps you on your toes. It helps you understand, you know, what it is that they see, and it also makes you a better photographer. You know, because there may be some things that kids may see that I can't see, and just learning from, just being able to learn from other people, also makes you a better photographer.
Yeah, I think there's that ability to see. I think that's what makes people photographers, and that's something that I don't know that people can necessarily be trained to do that. I think a lot of people see and see really well, but I don't know that everyone can see the same way photographers see, because I think there's so much in that eye.
Right. I mean, having that eye is a gift. I'll give you an example. Once the coronavirus started, I spent a lot of time at home. I wasn't going out. I wasn't taking assignments. Um, and I would play a lot of Madden online. And one day I was playing this kid. This kid was 11 years old. And this kid was able to read that football field better than these football players. And I thought to myself, and I said, hey, have you ever thought about picking up a camera? And he was like, no. And I said, not to put any pressure, put any pressure on you, but that might be your gift. I mean, if you can see that, because you controlling that controller is just like you having that camera to your eye with your finger on the shutter. And you can see that you have that vision.
Yeah, it definitely takes a different skill set and takes, but it's interesting in seeing that. I was reading something where in racing, there's been a lot of e-racing going on, and young kids beating professional race car drivers around track electronically. It'd be curious to see where all that would go in the future. I mean, Nissan ran a thing a couple of years ago where they actually did a race team that was through, one of the gaming systems where they brought the guys then to Le Mans and trained them. But it's curious to make those ties as to the skill sets and the motor skills, and now going and seeing the defense, seeing the way the players are moving and being able to make order out of that disorder.
Right. And that's why we have to keep these kids motivated. Like most people who come from where I come from, we don't have cameras. We don't know anything about photography. So, as a mentor and as a teacher, I'm making my due diligence to inform and educate people, because you don't have to have a fancy camera. I mean, you can use this right here and take amazing pictures.
Yeah, and it gives them a voice, gives them the ability to say show what they're seeing, say something about what their life, their friends' lives, but really to have a voice.
Yeah. And that's another reason I got into photography. I wanted to have a voice, and also wanted to be able to speak for those who don't have a voice. And by me taking photographs, kind of gives me that opportunity. Especially when it comes to PTSD. A lot of people don't understand PTSD, whether you are a service member, whether you're someone from the community, whether you may be incarcerated or returning citizen. We all go through stuff in life and we all process things differently. And when you process, it everyone reacts differently. And if you have a family member or loved one who doesn't understand, that right there can also, create more stress, or it could run you away. So by me using this as a tool, you now have family members that are able to better communicate with their loved ones, because now they have a better idea on what it is this person may be going through. They may not be able to physically understand it, but they can at least hopefully communicate with them a little better.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I know that's been through your work and something that you suffered through, and photography helped you work through that. Any advice for photographers in how to use their art and their creativity to help work through difficult times?
Just follow your heart, follow your mind. If it's a camera, let it be. If it's not, find something to channel that energy. Because the more you're being active, doing something that you love and you're passionate about, it can help you with your past experiences. And for me, I found photography.
Yeah, I mean, photography is a really powerful tool. So speaking of that, do you want to bring up some pictures we can start to look at and talk about, and we can run through some of the things that you've been doing and some of the things you've been covering?
Cool. All right, so I'm going to put together, I have the slideshow here, and I'm going to share my screen.
And so while you're doing that, another question popped in. Any recommendations for someone with a walking disability that would like to be a photojournalist?
being a photojournalist doesn't always mean that you have to be like, running the gunning. I mean, you may be able to find assignments where, you can have some type of walking device, whether it's a wheelchair or a scooter. Um, and just, my advice for you would just be maybe find your own stories, and just like maybe pitch them to an editor or get with someone. And there's no limitations.
Any hints on finding outlets, on finding places to get your stories told?
Places like this here, because I'm sure there are probably tons of photo editors online or that are participating. Normally when the world's opened up, you can, have portfolio reviews and critiques from photo editors. And that's a good way to get your work in front of these editors, to hopefully maybe get work or just to, gauge your skills. And hopefully you can, get a few tips that can help you become a better photographer.
All right, so you got some pictures ready for us?
Yeah. All right, so can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we got your screen up.
All right, there we go. And there we go. This photograph here was taken during the Freddie Gray uprising. And this was like right in front of the Western Police District in West Baltimore. And another thing about being a photojournalist or just a photographer in general, it's all about perspective. And, these images that I shot during Freddie Gray, if you look at your news wires, you generally wouldn't see images that look like this, because I'm shooting this from my perspective and how I see things, because I often tell people, although I'm a photojournalist, I'm still a Black man. I'm still a Freddie Gray. I'm still a Eric Gardner. So just how I'm shooting these events, someone else could be shooting these events because I could have gotten killed by a police officer. This year was around inauguration, 2016, 17. So all of the MAGA guys came to DC in protest. And this is the photograph taken outside of a pre-inauguration ball. And it was a ball headed up by David Duke, one of the former leaders of the KKK. And that night on the streets, as participants were coming out of the dinner, they were greeted by protesters. And as you can see, this protester here didn't want to have her identity shown. And that night, cops were out in full riot gear. And it's just been haywire in DC ever since.
So speaking of some of that conflict going on, from your perspective, has anything of the safety of journalists changed over the past week, or is it still interesting out there?
I mean, nothing to me, in my opinion, I think it's gotten a little worse. I mean, well, I can't speak for everyone. I can speak as a Black person, but as a photographer of color, it's pretty much stayed the same for the most part. It's definitely gotten worse because the press pass doesn't mean anything. I mean, you're still a target, and you have protesters on. I guess I don't know which side, but I mean, you'll have protesters who may not necessarily agree with the media, and you may have situations where, you're a member of the press, but you also want to maybe hide your identity because if someone knows that you're a member of the media, you can also be a target by them and police officers. As I'm sure everyone's seen, the use of excessive force by the Park Police and Secret Service over the summer when President Trump decided to go to the church for the photo op. So it doesn't matter if you have a press pass or not. if they want to clear something out, everyone's a target.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're going to show the pictures later on, but someone was asking, they were looking through your photographs of John Lewis, and they were asking if you ever got to know him, and they said that the image of the child looking up the steps at his flag-draped coffin is absolutely amazing.
That picture is in the slideshow. I've never met John Lewis. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I'll just drop in a little bit. But I have a photograph in this slideshow where that was my absolute last picture of John Lewis that I was able to take while he was alive. And that picture means the world to me. And looking at these photographs here, I hope and pray that DC or any other city in America doesn't look like this again when it comes to inauguration.
A question has come in from Doug in the audience. How do you deal with identities and who deserves to be kept undisclosed and those that can be exposed?
That's a good question. When I photograph, I just photograph. There was this big talk about people not wanting to have their faces shown or people to blur their faces. As a journalist, it's my job to come out and document, the truth and the facts. And it's just my personal opinion. I can't speak for everyone else, but if you don't want to be photographed, you shouldn't be out.
Sort of a follow-up question to that was asking if you have to have a release signed in order to show your photos.
No. The only time a release would be required if you were using that photograph to do something commercially. So let's say if you went out and I took a portrait of you and it runs on the New York Times. That's editorial, so it's okay. But let's say FUJIFILM wants to do an advertisement because they like the camera that you had in your hand. Therefore, you would have to sign a model release because that photograph will be being used commercially. I want to talk about this photograph here. So this photograph here was taken on March 1st of this year. And this is when Michael Bloomberg made a campaign stop in Selma, Alabama. And this was the 55th anniversary of of Bloody Sunday, the March for Voting Rights, which John Lewis led. So this group of church members stood up in protest of Michael Bloomberg. And not sure if you guys can see, but if you look at the back of the screen, you'll see Michael Bloomberg on the monitor speaking. And this is that photograph of John Lewis that I took, my absolute last photograph of Congressman Lewis crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So for those out in the audience who doesn't know the history of the bridge, this was the bridge that John Lewis and other civil rights leaders, foot soldiers, and people of color were beaten on that Bloody Sunday 55 years ago. So they made the march from Selma to Montgomery, which is about, I want to say 50 miles. And they marched to the state capitol to protest for equal voting rights for Black and brown Americans.
Is there any topics that you've covered in the past that you think need to be pushed out and given more of a spotlight now in the future?
I think everything does. I mean, for instance, this photograph here. This photograph was taken during a George Floyd protest. And I mean, this photograph kind of caught me off guard because I was walking down the street trying to catch up with the protest. So protesters left the White House, and I think they were marching to the Trump Hotel. And since it's COVID, you have to kind of operate and move differently. So you don't want to be in crowds. So I try to stay away from the crowds if I can. And I figured I had enough shots. I'm going to go ahead, cut across a few streets and maybe beat the crowd to the hotel. Somehow that didn't happen. And as I was walking down the street, I see this police officer and I look into his car And I'm just like, no, no, he can't be reading that. And I crossed the street and I took my camera, and my camera was asleep. And I woke the camera up, made sure my settings were right, and I walked back. And as I photographed the police officer, he attempted to roll up his window. And I guess the police officer thought that he had tinted windows in his vehicle, which he didn't, because as you can see at the bottom half of the screen, there's a gentleman who works for the transit agency. So this transit employee was asking the police officer, due to the protests, what are some other alternate routes that he can take to get his bus out of downtown DC? And just like the look on that transit worker's face to see what this, protector of the community, this police officer was looking at. And, I kind of like, I was highly offended, and I'm sure he was too. I'm gonna go back here. So for those who don't know, um, DC's mayor changed the name of 16th Street to Black Lives Matter Plaza. And she did that in response to Donald Trump once he ordered the National Guard and the police to clear demonstrators out of the street so that he can take a photo op. So the mayor did this in response, and Black Lives Matter place now is like the new safe haven for people to come and just fellowship and just hang out. So I'm gonna go back to John Lewis. So this was a Saturday, the day of his, I'm sorry, the morning of his death. He passed on a Friday. So I woke up that Saturday and I wanted to go down to his office, but I was deeply saddened that I just couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. And I finally get out to go to his office. And normally when I'm working on Capitol Hill, I'll park in a parking garage. But since it's the weekend and there shouldn't be that many cars in the street, I found street parking, and it was like a 90-degree day. It was hot, and I just wanted to soak up some more AC and try to get myself together mentally. And I just sat there for like 30 minutes. And as I was walking out the car, normally I have my cameras out, and my camera was in my backpack. And I see this gentleman walking down the street with a sign that says Freedom Way. And that was a street sign named after John Lewis. And I didn't realize that that was one of his staff members. So I started to go into my bag and I pulled the camera, and I realized, I'm not gonna be able to get this guy. So I decided to follow him. So as I followed him across the street, I kept my distance. We were about 6 feet apart. And as I'm putting the camera to my eye, something said, "Hey, talk to him." And we started talking, and he told me who he was. And he said, "Hey, if you go to his office now, there's some notes on his door." And I decided to take a walk over to his office, and this is one of the notes on the door. And as we all know, all flags were lowered to half mast for Representative Lewis. And this photograph here was taken on the Washington Monument, where you can see we have a clear view of the Capitol. Here's President-elect Joe Biden and Dr. Joe Biden paying their final respects to Congressman Lewis. And there we have Vice President Pence and First Lady Pence. They didn't attend the ceremony inside, so they came shortly after, and they came to pay their respects as well. Although we didn't see President Trump there, so we're just looking for him, but he never showed. And this here's a photograph of the public viewing. You know, the lines were long, and people just came to pay their respect. And this the child that everyone was talking about. You know, this photograph here just like meant the world to me. You know, this kid is 7 years old. Okay.
Another question's come in. I'll let you finish your story. I'll get you after you're done.
No. Okay. So like this kid here is like 6 or 7 years old, and like this just stuck out to me because like this kid says, "Hey, you know, this guy's giving me so much hope. You know, it's my job to be just like him, if not better, when I grow up." And like, you know, that just made my day.
When you take something like that, I mean, do you in the moment see the greatness of that picture, or is that something that you see later on because you're too caught up in what you're doing and the way you're seeing?
I mean, sometimes you do, but I mean, you definitely see the value, you know, after you go home and process it. And even like today, you know, that picture was taken in July, and every time you look at that picture, you know, you see something different. You know, you're censored to say, "Hey, you know, this photograph needs to be," but you don't really know the impact or how much effect it would have on somebody or even yourself until you really sit there and you have the time to like physically, you know, thoroughly look at it.
And in taking a picture like that, how often do you talk to the people and get other information about what's going on, or do you try to keep yourself, you know, sort of separated from some of these situations?
It's on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, you know, I would always try to go get an ID for someone, because if I'm writing a caption, definitely want to have at least their names, excuse me, for the captions. But you know, you may have a really, really emotional moment where you just be mindful and respectful, and you just want to stay out their way. So we're looking at photographs here from an explosion of that happened over 4 row homes. Had a gas leak, and there was like a big explosion that shattered like 2 blocks of like row homes, and it collapsed, I want to say 4 row homes. And it was a very long and dangerous day. As you can see, this firefighter here was taking a break, drinking Gatorade, and it was a pretty long day. And I want to say there may have been, I want to say 4 confirmed fatalities during this explosion there. And another thing about being a photojournalist, you know, you have to be a good talker. So as you can see, like my vantage point is like very like up close and personal, you know, because all the press and media for the most part were held up the block. And there was no way that you would be able to get this vantage point. But, you know, being from Baltimore and knowing the community and being able to identify to the community, you know, gave me an advantage. So I know everybody in Baltimore has alleys. So I started walking through the alleys and just talking to the neighbors and just being genuine. You know, people would let me into their homes so that I can, you know, go out front or maybe shoot from a window. And not sure where the actual explosion happened. I had to go through like 3 different like houses just to like find like the best vantage point. And once I did, I was there for like maybe like 30, 40 minutes, kind of like a fly on the wall. And like, there were like tons of like police officers, gas company employees, firefighters, and like no one really knew I was there. But eventually a police officer spotted me and told me I had to leave.
So that was a perfect segue for one of the questions that came in. Was asking, do you have a particular lens you like to shoot with, or a particular focal length lens?
It depends on the assignment. So like this here, That day I shot with everything from my 16 to 55, my 50 to 140. Also shot my 200 f2, and there were some times where I would take the 1.4 teleconverter just to get that extra push. So if you're looking at this photograph here, that was taken with the 200 f2. Now I could have taken this picture with the 50 to 140 and definitely like cropped in a little bit, but it allows me to have a little more depth and a little more compression. So that's why I chose to shoot it with the the 200 with the teleconverter. Because some scenes you may not have access to. If I were shooting, work on Capitol Hill, I generally use a 16 to 55, a 50 to 140, and occasionally a 200 f2. But if I were doing a portrait, I will go to my favorite go-to lens, which is the 35-1.4, because it allows me to be more close and personal. So depending on the situation and the limitation dictates what type of equipment I use. And these photographs here were taken from the March on Washington, led by Reverend Al Sharpton. This march here came on the heels of, I want to say the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. And it came in the wake of George Floyd. So as you can see, there's a person in the back holding up a portrait of George Floyd. And this photograph here actually made the front page for the New York Times that Sunday. And the title of the march was "Get Your Foot Off My Neck." And, Reverend Sharpton and other activists and community leaders got up to express their pain and frustrations on how Black Americans are treated in this world. And this here is like one of my favorite pictures from the march, because this little young girl, I don't know how she did it, but she managed to bypass security, and she sat on that step. And as they were coming to escort her off, Reverend Sharpton said, "If this young sister wants to sit there, let her sit there." And that photograph right there showed that this little young girl is woke. She could have been no more than like 9 or 10 years old. And moving forward, we definitely need leaders like this in our world and our community to help make this world a better place. And this is the family of George Floyd. And for those who don't know, George Floyd was an unarmed Black man who was killed by a police officer in Minneapolis. And this police officer had his foot on Mr. Floyd's neck. Sorry. And I'm gonna take it back to like some Capitol Hill images. This is Mitch McConnell at a press conference, and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer at a press conference. And sometimes when you're shooting these press conferences, a lot of images, can get redundant. So you have to like get creative sometimes. And you just find yourself looking for that light. And I love this room here because there are like certain patches of like light that like kind of fall off really good, as you can see here. And just get around and play. I saw that there was a flag here, and I want to say off to the right that may have been it's like the back of like another congressperson's shirt. And you just play with the light and make it do what it do. And here's like another example of like using that light. So just catching the early morning light at a memorial for the late RGB. Just find a way to make a picture. A friend of mine would say, by the name of Cerise May, it's called finding that quiet moment. And I think I found it. And this is the Speaker Nancy Pelosi dropping off a bouquet of flowers at the memorial for the late RGB. And another thing I want to talk about, as far as like telling stories and, reporting news. If you go back here, this here was the main story. Everyone was at the Supreme Court paying their respect. But I took it upon myself to find other places where I may find people paying respect to RGB. So I went maybe about a mile away and I found this alley and there was a mural of her. And I just found people just taking little sticky notes, writing messages, and just posting them on the wall. And if you look here, you'll see some of the notes that were left. And this here was like the actual day that they held her body lying in, what do they call it for the Supreme Court? I want to say repose. So the morning of the ceremony, I get a call from my editor, I said text, and they said, hey, President Trump's going to come out. And I said, cool. And we had like two press positions, one on the side of the steps of the Supreme Court and another one across the street, looking directly on. So looking directly on, it was pretty crowded, and it was a pretty long throw. So in order to get that picture, you would need at least on a full frame camera, at least 400 millimeters and a possible teleconverter to like get it really tight.
If I stay on this side, I can, maybe get this angle and have like a little more flexibility so that I can, get a few different.
So as I'm standing there, I see the first lady and I'm just like, so where's the president? So I thought that he came by himself. And as I, took the photograph, I decided to walk down a little farther, and then I could see the president hiding behind these walls. And I guess he didn't want to be photographed. And I could have sworn he looked at me, and I put my camera to my eye, and he kind of like turned his back and hid. So I think the president may know who I am. As we can see, there were like people like lined up for like blocks to pay their final respects to the late RGB. And something else about journalism and photography in general, it's all about being creative. Sometimes you got to think outside the box and take the extra mile to make that photograph. And it's all about access. So I was able to take this photograph from the steps of the U.S. Capitol. And most people don't have access to the U.S. Capitol, so it's a shot that most photographers wouldn't get unless you had like Capitol credentials. And that's like another way to tell a story.
So we have a question came in from Peter. As a fellow veteran, I'm trying to break into photojournalism. Any suggestions?
Like I said before, I mean, just keep shooting, shoot your butt off, make connections. It's all about relationships. If you want to reach out to me after, you can definitely do that. And just keep your body at work and never quit. Like I said, find that one thing that you're passionate about. And just work that story like no one's ever worked it before. And I mean, it may be a hard road in the beginning, but it'll eventually pay off. You just gotta endure it and just keep it pushing. And something else I like to do too when I'm photographing, especially places like Capitol Hill. When can you still hear me, Justin?
Yep, got you.
All right. So one thing I like to do on Capitol Hill and other places where I'm photographing members of the Congress and the Senate, ever since the passing of John Lewis, Elijah Cummings, I find that for me, it's my responsibility to photograph other leaders such as, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Representative Jim Clyburn, um, or even the younger guys, like Hakeem Jeffries from New York, because no one like really photographs our Black leaders. And you never know. Life is so short. They may be here today and they may be gone tomorrow. So it's all about finding something that you're passionate about, finding something with a purpose, and just like working.
Another question that's come in on the chat is asking if you studied photography before going into military service, or did you have any professional training in photography?
I did not. This is all self-taught. Lots of YouTube, these photo books behind me. I don't know if you guys can still see what's going on in the back of me, but those photo books and just like having accountability partners. Just having a buddy that you can go to that's a better photographer than you are, and say, hey, what do you think of my work? He may shoot it down, but you have to have tough skin because it's all about perspective. And sometimes we tend to think that our work may be more than what it is, but if you don't have anyone to hold you accountable, you would never know. So you have to be able to accept criticism. It only makes you a better photographer in the long haul.
Yeah, I think it's really important to find a mentor, to find someone to challenge you and push you to do more.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find a few more photographs. You guys can still see my screen, correct?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. All right.
While you're looking, is there any stories that you're really want to go tell that you haven't been able to tell yet?
I would love to go back and work on my veterans project. But the thing is, it's all about funding, and if you don't have the funds to complete this work, I mean, as much as I would love to, it's kind of hard, because I still have to take photographs and pay bills. So I would definitely love to shed light on veteran issues, especially during COVID, and how COVID affects our veteran community.
Yeah, it's unfortunately the way the world of journalism is really gone, that the publications don't really have the funding anymore to prospect for assignments. The photographers are oftentimes out shooting assignments on their own and then hoping that a magazine or a newspaper or someone's going to pick it up as something they want to talk about. Another really interesting question has come in from Loretta. What personal toll do you experience as a result of the tragedy you document and the exhaustive rigors you endure to do so?
Wow, that's pretty deep. I'm human. I mean, I have feelings. I mean, everything that I photograph, I mean, it has some type of an effect. As a journalist, I mean, it's your job to I don't want to say not look weak, but you just deal with it, and you just got to find the best way to do self-care to endure. So for me, if I'm not working, I'm playing John Madden football. So that right there, taking walks. I used to exercise a lot, but I'm starting to pick up a little bit of weight. But you got to find that outlet to release that stress, because if not, it'll definitely wear down. And sometimes you just got to take time off. Over the summer, I worked 10 days a week, and a good friend of mine, Lindsay Witherspoon, she said, dude, you got to take some time off. And I said, I can't. And I burnt myself out. And she said, hey, I told you you were going to burn yourself out. And, I'm still recovering. I mean, even though I'm working, but I worked so much and spent little time on just worrying about me and making sure that I was okay, that I'm paying the effects, and hopefully I can be back to 100%. But I definitely take notice. So if you're a photographer, whatever you do, always take time for yourself.
So Michael, we've got about 5 minutes left or so. Anything you really want to talk about or cover that we haven't talked about already today?
I think we're pretty good. Like I always tell people, be passionate about what it is. Like 2020's been one heck of a year. The only thing we can do is, hope for better. Change starts from within. So if you're going to be out and about, treat people with some honor, and some respect, and dignity, and be understanding.
We have had another question come in while we were talking. How do you keep all of your images straight to save them for prosperity?
I have one of these. This is what is this? A 6 terabyte. And then I have another 6 terabyte. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and like 4 2 terabytes. And I just keep a extensive backup.
When you're out for pleasure, so a moment of not on work, not out shooting anything for an assignment, do you carry a camera with you at all times, or you let your guard down and not carry a camera?
Well, for the longest, I used to carry this baby around, my old X100T. Like a lot of those protest pictures that we all saw were shot with this camera here. That and my XT10 with a 3514. So like that would be my go-to camera. But if I don't have anything, I'll take this. But let's see if I have it. One of my good buddies gave me a gift a few weeks ago, and it was one of those moment lenses. So I have this, I want to say it's a 50 equivalent, and I can then take my iPhone and I can do portraits at 50 millimeters with it. And they also have like a Y, and then I think they have like they have an 18, I want to say maybe 35, and then like a 50. So if I don't have an actual like Fuji or any other kind of camera on me, I at least have a cell phone camera.
So I've got 2 last questions for you, Michael, and then we'll let you get back to it. Number 1 is about this picture you're showing us right now. How did you get permission to take photos inside a polling place?
Well, you have to be special. Different states have different laws. So the cool thing about where I live, I live right on the border of Maryland, DC, and Virginia. Maryland, DC, and Virginia, members of the press are allowed to photograph inside the polls, but we can't shoot people actually casting their ballots. We kind of have to be mindful and respectful. So this here was in Washington, D.C. at the Capital One Arena, where the Wizards and the Caps and the Mystics used to play. And this lady here was a woman of Asian descent, and she was actually casting her vote using the translator.
And our last question for today is why Fujifilm?
I just love it. I mean, it's small, it's compact. I can remain like incognito. No one really knows that I'm there. If I'm shooting certain events, with that silent shutter, you can't hear anything. And like no one knows that they're being photographed.
Well, Michael McCoy, thank you for joining us today. Everyone out there watching the presentation, thank you for joining in and tuning in to look at Michael's amazing work covering Washington, D.C. Michael, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to link up with you, man. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. Is my email info in the chat? Let me see. Not sure. I'll add it there. And if not, you guys can follow me at Michael A. McCoy Photography on Instagram and Mike A. McCoy Photo on Twitter, I believe. and I definitely enjoyed this opportunity. Had a great time, and can't wait to do it again.
All right, Michael, great to see you again. Take care down there and be safe, okay?
All right, thanks a lot, guys.